It's been 84 years.
Hey guys, it's the Pink King here. This video's been long overdue now, hasn't it? With me covering so much hell of a boss, it was about time I gave its predecessor a video. And what good timing as of the recording of this video, the new trailer for Hazbin Hotel has finally released, to a lot of mixed feedback. I'll get into that in a bit. And we also now have an official release date, with the series set to air on Amazon Prime on January the 19th, 2024. A full-on 4 and a bit years from the pilot's release. And a lot has changed since then, huh? With one change being the show's new look, as it has had a drastic design overhaul from the pilot, with a lot of designs getting improvements. However, they still share a similar cookie cutter issue, but it's not as bad as it was in the past, so I'll let that slide. Alongside the visuals, the cast has also gone through some changes, with a lot of actors from the pilot now replaced with many other actors. Whether this was a good idea or not, we still don't know yet, but considering the talent now is quite high, just goes to show how high profile this series already is, and it's not even released yet. That alone is already a fantastic accomplishment in not only indie animation, but in TV in general. So with all that context out the way, what are my thoughts on the project so far? And why is this trailer getting very mixed feedback? Well, I'm gonna be honest, I can see both sides of the argument here.
Boo this man!
Why you booing me? I'm right.
I see why this has gotten a lot of mixed feedback. For one, the animation looks really nice. It's vibrant while also being energetic. It has a lot of nice and cool ideas. It's teasing alongside the fact that I'm very curious to see how they're going to tackle this story. After all, this is supposed to be VivziePop's magnum opus. And going off Hell of a Boss, when they had a genuinely interesting story, they knew how to handle it. So my hopes are that with the backing of Amazon, the show looks like it's going to be something certainly special. After all, this isn't the first time Amazon's taken a risk in making shows for adults. Hell, one of my current shows is the one they're running, Invincible. And that was a big risk for them, so at this point taking big risks on shows like this is pretty much just an average Tuesday for them. So when you got the backing of them, it certainly is something to look forward to. But then you gotta look on the other side, and arguably the biggest sin so far is that the trailer's not really that funny. Once again, they're just going for the same shocking equals comedy approach, and I'm gonna be honest, it just doesn't work. This style of comedy is something right out of the early days of YouTube, and not in a good way. It just feels like the show's trying to be crass and rude just for the sake of it. As if it needs to be like Family Guy, where they have to swear and show violence just to justify it being for adults. And honestly, that style of comedy has gotten old really fast. Hell, for a while it was an entire meme that anything with a lot of swearing and innuendos was something written by VivziePop. And after this trailer, you can certainly see why people think that. And I know it's just a trailer, so I can't be too harsh on it, but considering what they're choosing to show is supposed to give a rough idea of what the show will be, after all it is advertising the show, then you can definitely tell why I'm a bit concerned with this show. And that brings me to the thing I want to talk about the most, and that's, I'm very worried how this show's gonna do. Don't get me wrong, this show's probably gonna blow records within the first 2 episodes, but what about after that? I don't know how many episodes they have planned for season 1, but if they have up to, let's say, 8, they better have a good story to keep people engaged. Because that's how shows like this die off so quickly. They're usually popular within the first 2 weeks, but when those rose-tinted glasses begin to fade, and there's no interesting story, suddenly nobody cares. As an example, just look at shows like The Mandalorian Season 3 and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The first few episodes were very hyped up, but once that curiosity faded and people began to see the shows for what they really were, it died off and became irrelevant very fast. And Hazbin Hotel is at the same risk here, because looking at the trailer, I'm curious to see what they do. But that's just it. I'm just curious. I'm no longer excited to see this show, if I'm going to be honest, because a lot of that goodwill has been spoiled recently, with the lack of transparency behind the scenes, and yes, hell of a boss. And it's here I want to ask the question, is it too late? Remember, this show's pilot came out over 4 years ago, close to 5. And in that time, there should be a question raised whether it's too little too late. After all, this type of crude humour, as an example, was pretty funny back in 2019 when the pilot was released, but now it feels a little stale, to say the least. Because time has moved on, and these weren't jokes that really planned on staying timeless. So there's a legitimate concern here that by the time it does release, it will already be outdated, and for lack of a better term, boring. Now, I'm not saying that's gonna happen, of course, but given everything we know, that seems like a very likely outcome right now. VivziePop's style has always been pretty controversial, with a lot of what she does coming across as outdated and rather amateurish, with there ever rarely being a good story in her works, as they tend to follow the same patterns. That being, introduce a story, add a bunch of unnecessary side stories on top of it, and cram it full of outdated and unfunny jokes, mixed in with some occasional good ones and some nice animation, and that's it. It's become so repetitive now that you could make a bingo list in every Hell of a Boss episode. It's that formulaic. But one thing a lot of people I've noticed talk about this don't point out is that VivziePop can make her style work. I know a lot of people like to bash on the way she does things, and I am certainly guilty to that as well. But I think it's important to understand that this can actually change, and she can actually improve this, if she follows in one of her friends' footsteps, aka Brandon Rogers. Now, I know Brandon himself has a lot of similar shocking content, and a style that you could say is outdated, so how do you make it better? It's simple, you just evolve it. Brandon over the years has gradually been shifting his style to be giving his videos more substance and setups to help keep the jokes fresh. Sure, it hasn't always worked, but it's that evolution that has allowed his projects to still do well. Over a decade later, no less. It's not a matter of ditching your style, but allowing it to grow and improve. No longer coming across as groan-worthy, as when one joke doesn't land, it pulls you back in with the setup and the substance, then catches you with another joke that actually does work. It's a tough process, but it's one that pays off well if you do it right. So if anything, VivziePop and her crew shouldn't be taking the shock comedy as inspiration, but rather the way that comedy is set up and grown over the years. Because after all, it doesn't matter how unfunny a joke is, it's how you deliver the joke that makes it good. So overall, I gotta say, I'm very intrigued by this trailer, and I want to know just how good this show is. However, there are a lot of drawbacks that still haven't been ironed out yet, that need to be ironed out fast if this show wants to do well. So honestly, I'm not gonna recommend it right now. I'm gonna let this show come out first before I can make any judgment on whether or not it's good. And once I finally see the show, I'll be able to give you a review on it. So, what did you guys think of the trailer? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere in between, like me? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you all next time.